Furthermore, we have not even to risk the journey alone, for the heroes of all time have gone before us, and the labyrinth is thoroughly known. We have only to follow the thread of the hero's path, and where we had thought to find abomination, we shall find God. And where we had thought to slay another, we shall slay ourselves. Where we had thought to travel outward, we shall come to the center of our own existence. And where we had thought to be alone, we shall be with all the world.
Who are we and where are we going? How did we get here? And Joseph Campbell, an American mythologist, he had a wonderful teaching on what's called the hero's journey. And what he did was he paged through all the philosophical treatises of all the world's traditions and all the myth and all the lore and all the legend, from Greece to China to India, Syrian myths. And what he did was he found a very common motif about the human journey in those pages, and he developed an art topology or a map or roadmap of the human journey that he found each of those traditions were all teaching us what he ended up calling a monomyth. And that monomyth is broken down into 12 stages, epic of the human journey, what it means to be alive and to be fully human, and the path that each of us has to take to arrive at our fullest potential.
How did we get here? When you look at what's happening in this country, and particularly what's happening in this planet, something has gone astray. And those things include our connection with nature, our connection with community, and our connection with the realm of spirit beyond what the five senses can perceive. So prayer goes out the window, God dies, our ties to nature die, our ties to each other die, our connection to our body dies, so we become neck up individual isolates, but don't have the faintest idea about the spirit. And this is why we can destroy the planet. We are like a life raft, the only one of its kind, floating in outer space, and we are puncturing our life raft, destroying it. And that is because we have become attuned to five sense media, that we have deprived ourselves of the sensitivity of what is beyond those five senses, the invisible realm of spirit, the invisible realm of the cycles of nature, the invisible realm of attunement and presence between each other and between living beings, but also between ourselves, our unconscious, our instincts, our basic needs. A lot of these have been severed.
The doorway into the spiritual path is a moment of suffering. A moment of awakening is usually a knock at the door where something is taken away from you, where you are woken to the reality that things aren't as stable and secure and sure thing as you have tried to make them out to be. Reality comes and knocks on the door and says, you're going to get sick, you're going to get old, you're going to die, or you're going to lose everything that you're trying to accumulate and everybody that you love. That's the reality. It's undisputable, and it hits and affects all of us. And it usually hits us and affects us at the time where we least expect it. And of course, our traditions have not prepared us for that moment, where we can answer the call, and usually what happens is we refuse the call. We bury our heads in the sand, we go right back to what we know, we try to grab at Linus's that blanket, we try to return, like for example, a breakup. Significantly painful, disruptive, psychically tumultuous. What we do is we collapse under the pressure of that massive change, and we reach and grab to restore that relationship or one just like it. And we miss the opportunity to evaluate, why didn't it work out in the first place? What's happening in the refusal call is not only that we're too scared, it's also that we don't have the confidence. Every spiritual hero has a mentor. Luke Skywalker has Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan has Yoda, and Yoda has his guru, and the lineage. The lineage is a totem that crosses history, and along the way, a sacred knowledge is passed. And I have to say, in my own life, there's no way that I would have achieved any level of happiness or success or security, real fluid security, not terrified security, without meeting a mentor. Crossing the threshold, that's the moment where you pass over your familiar protective boundaries and you enter into the unknown, you step into the fragile. In a therapy office, what that is after those several weeks or months of feeling comfortable and hoping to be accepted, there's that moment of vulnerability where you think, oh my God, am I going to really reveal to this person, this potential stranger, this potential person who might reject me, my deepest inadequacies or my insecurities or my fears? You cross that threshold and you road test what it's like to be in an unfamiliar, uncharted, potentially dangerous territory. Which is test allies and enemies. Test allies and enemies is are you going to be able to meet the challenges of unpredictability, uncertainty, and fear using the skills that your mentor has given you? So Luke learns to use a lightsaber, and what he finds is that he's met with challenges and enemies, and he has to wield his weapon. So the sacred arts in Tibetan Buddhism are the meditations that allow you to become calm so that you can preserve the integrity of your wisdom and understanding, and your compassion so that you can learn to intervene with the most skillful pro-social attitude and effectiveness that a human being is really capable of. So the inner enemy is our own self-protective nature, our own aggressive instincts, our own resistance to vulnerability, and the inner ally is love and compassion. Entering the dark cave is in Star Wars, where he's on the planet of Dagobah. Yoda is teaching him the arts and sends him to the tree, which is very metaphoric, because the tree is a motif that's through every spiritual tradition, because it connects the heavens and the hells. What he does is he descends, just like one descends into the depths of one's psyche, where all the unwanted, fragmented, and traumatic aspects of our personality reside, and collectively too. He descends into that tree, and what he finds there is his arch enemy, Darth Vader. And in the duel with the lightsabers, what happens is Luke severs the mask of Darth Vader, and there he sees his own face. And what that is saying is that the deepest source of all our ill and suffering is our self-identification, our crystallized sense of self as being unlovable and inadequate and unwanted and incapable. What has happened on the heels of trauma early on in our own life and through history, transgenerationally imported through stories and narratives, is that when painful moments happen, we crystallize around them. So it could be a moment of fear, it could be a moment of shame, it could be a moment of loneliness, and in that painful moment, what happens is we crystallize our identity around those things, like a salt pillar, I like to call it, and we say, this is me. So what happens to be a fluid moment of shame becomes, I am capable. What happens under a fluid moment of fear is, I can't face the world. So when we enter the dark cave, what we're doing is we're coming closer to the very thing we have spent our whole life trying to move away from and trying to confirm that that's not who we are. And a very secret, sacred opportunity happens when you get closer to the salt pillar or the original womb or the traumatic sensibility or the traumatic identity, is that you can discover that has never been who you are. Apex moment of the hero's journey is slaying the demon moment, where you finally confront and slay the deepest, darkest principle or activating principle or force in yourself. Buried treasure, thing that we're seeking, the elixir of immortality, is guarded by a demon. And what that is before you get to the treasure, you first have to slay the demon. Once you slay the demon, of course the demon isn't an external demon, the demon is an internal demon. What you can find is the very treasure. Which is, instead of trying to find it out there, instead of trying to go on a archaeological trip to find the cup of Christ in Syria, if we turned our hero's journey inwards and we are able to confront the demon of our own self-grasping and traumatic self-salt pillar, what we can find underneath it is there has always been this tremendous wellspring of love and compassion. From the Tibetan point of view, the most outstanding wellspring resource on the planet is the unending abundance of love and compassion that we are all capable of tapping inside ourselves. We've had enough to really give other people. And that's the very curious thing about compassion is Lama Zopa Rinpoche, some of my teachers, Gaelic Rinpoche, they like to say that there is no higher happiness than generosity and compassion. It is when we are connected through the matrix of vibration through other living beings, when we feel them as us, and we want to nurture them as if they were us, there is no greater commodity, there's no greater experience than that. So we're heading now back from the dark forest and slaying the demon and finding the wellspring of the treasure of love and compassion, back home, basically. We go through, probably what we'll go through is we have to go through another trial, which is the trial. We face the demon in our trial, but then we have to face the consequences of coming back home. You have to get off your cushion, you have to come out of the office, back into work, back into relationships, and guess what? The world hasn't changed. And what happens is that you feel the forces of their negativity and their hostility and their jealousy. So you have your first couple of series of trials of, let's see if I can road test this wonderful commodity, wonderful thing that I've discovered that is innate to my biology and my birthright is love and compassion. And when I finally actualize it, I will be tested by the world that is still struggling and starving and toxic and ready to devour me. So we'll encounter trials on the way out, and then we will return home with the elixir. Basically, is the idea is what you have discovered as a human being on the hero's journey doesn't end with you. The journey doesn't end with your discovery. The journey ends when you bring it home and you share it. Because those living beings out there who haven't met a mentor, who are still in the shire of the denial or in the rough seas of their afflictive emotions, they need the elixir too. They need you to be a mentor of kindness, an epitome of compassion, a force of guiding principle to help orient them on their hero's journey. And so that's where the whole thing comes full circle. Right back home, into the Shire, in your interactions with living beings, as a template, as a model, being a guide in whatever capacity relative to the needs of the individuals that you come in contact. If that is just a smile, if that's just a moment of pause, if that's a moment of honoring their condition, if it's more complicated and intense where they actually ask you for help, or they ask you for a skill, or they ask you for a resource, you give them whatever they need to help set them out on their journey. Widening the scope of who we think we are. We're not just this narrow pillar of being, we are a living organism. We're a vast, interconnected, living organism. And that's the channels out of which we teach and embody love and compassion for the benefit of the planet. And that's the culmination of the hero's journey. That's the path that we're all on.